And welcome to the Crew Mess, coming live to you from Palma de Mallorca and also coming live to you from Scotland. We have Captain Ian Flockhart with us today.
Lovely to have you back
Ian,
on the
we've
station.
Missed you. It's been too long.
It's been a while.
It takes a global pandemic to get you back.
It's been a while.
Yeah. What's happening? How are you up there?
Yeah, okay. No, all good enough.
Good. You and the family and friends unscathed with this pandemic that's going around?
Not entirely. I've got a cousin who's got it.
Oh.
She seems to be doing okay. So it has touched us slightly.
I actually, one of my cousins died from it, and I feel really embarrassed because when my sister told me, in the back of my head, going like, "Wow, is she still alive?" But yeah, it's.
But I think it's touched us all. I mean, I haven't talked to anyone recently who hasn't had a family member or a friend or somebody, either being tested or having it, or so it certainly is a universal experience at the moment.
Yeah, no, as I say, it's touched our family just in one area, but hopefully that'll be all. And she seems to be sort of doing all right with it anyway. So hopefully it'll all pass over in due course, and everything will be fine.
I think people have got to bear that in mind, that it's not bubonic plague. It's not a death sentence. It's a percentage of people who don't recover from it, and it's a small percentage of that.
Yeah.
So moving on, because we have been
Really?
endeavouring.
You don't want to talk longer about it?
No, we've been endeavouring to try and not focus, even though it's, in all of our conversations, we're trying to focus on the other things that are happening in the world that isn't hitting. And one of the things we were chatting about, Ian, is crew at the moment. Hashtag I stay on board or hashtag I stay home. Lots of crew at the moment aren't going anywhere. I actually had a conversation a couple of weeks back with a cousin who had a young green crew. She was ready. She'd done all her stew exams. She was ready to roll and head to Antibes.
Oh, bushy-tailed, bright-eyed.
Yeah, all excited. And then, boom, this hit. And so my cousin rang me up going, what advice do you have for her? And I kind of gave her bits and pieces that we had from talking to crew recruitments. And then I said, and I'm going to give you a friend of mine's address. He's a really good mentor. And I think you should get in touch with him, because we're radio, but he knows how to mentor crew. So back to you, Ian.
I think in any situation like this where things have sort of somewhat out of the ordinary, to say the least, the best thing to do is make sure you keep yourself busy. You could very much see this as an opportunity rather than a disaster. Crew start descending upon the major yachting hubs, and obviously that is not going to happen imminently as things stand at the moment. We don't know when it will be back in order, but the fact of the matter is that people have got now more time than they would ordinarily to get them starting a new season, especially if they are completely new to yachting. So I would say very much use this as an opportunity. This extra time could be very valuable to some people. So use it wisely and make sure that you get yourself as prepared as you possibly can for when it does settle down a bit, which it will do.
Okay, so some suggestions. I mean, it obviously ranges what position they're wanting to come into. So whether they're green crew just coming in as deckhands, or stew or engineer. However, of things that they can be doing right now. We've certainly talked this week about various online courses. The PWA put up an interesting list. We talked to A-Crew this week, and they've got webinars coming up in about 2 weeks' time. Their workshops are going online. So I've certainly seen some resources like that. Other suggestions of what they can do? I mean, the CV is a big part of it too, of getting that right.
I mean, that's the very first thing that that I was going to suggest people should be doing. Just take whatever time you've got available to work on your CV and make sure it is as absolutely perfect as you can possibly get it. Many people's CVs these days are still lacking in numerous ways. So I think very much the first thing I would be doing is just spend more time going through your CV very, very thoroughly and making sure that you've done the absolute best job of it that you can. And if you're not comfortable with your own skills in doing that, and let's be honest, if you're 19, 20 years old, with all due respect to even the smartest people of that age, you do not have a lot of life experience. You probably don't have any industry experience. So to be expected to be able to produce a fantastic CV is really quite a tall order. So I don't think there's any shame in accepting the fact that perhaps you do need some help to get your CV as sharp as it needs to be.
Well, what makes for a good CV? I mean, you give a very good example there. When you're starting off, I remember when I started off my career as a software engineer way back.
You don't have that much to put on it is one of the problems.
That's it. So the worst thing you do is waffle it. What makes for a good CV? Is it getting the right mix of content? Is it the format? Is it the design? How you do? What would?
Or is it? There's also. Can I add to that? Is there cultural differences? American CVs sometimes kind of start with a personal statement of who they are, and then experience or whatever. Are there cultural differences as well in how we present our CVs?
That is in its entirety a very expansive question.
Sorry,
and it could take,
throwing a couple at you.
A very considerable time to answer it properly. I've been doing an awful lot of work over the last 2 weeks because I'm actually working on a very detailed CV course that I'm building. So this is all very fresh in my mind at the moment. I think there's a great deal of psychology in a CV that I don't think a lot of people are aware of. My personal view on the smartest thing you can do with a CV, we'll go through a few things, but I think the very smartest thing you can do is do not deviate in any way from what is considered to be a very standard, tried and tested layout.
Okay, so don't necessarily try and be different and do it differently. No,
because you're causing yourself numerous problems there, and you're putting a load of barriers in between you and the person reading your CV. It's become quite trendy for people to use, funky alternative designs for CVs, and I think it's suicidal. Across all industries, according to some research I've been doing, recruiters will look at your CV for less than 10 seconds. If they have to start looking...
Ouch, sorry, that's very disappointing considering how long you probably work on it.
I've been on a bridge with a captain. I've seen the mountain of CVs that he's got in front of him. And the first thing that, and I've seen this in a couple of captains, first thing they do is they divide that pile in half. So you're either in the
I'm writing extensively at the moment about what I call the triage process for CVs. I think we might have touched on this before in one of our previous sessions. I mean, for me, it's very simple. There's the ones that go straight into the shredder. There's the ones that you will come back to if you're absolutely desperate and running out of time. And then there's the ones that show a certain amount of promise. And you need to be in that last pile. Let me put a little caveat on what I said about the 10 seconds. It wasn't clear in any of the research that I did, but I think the implication is that this is on your initial review of your CV. Obviously, if you get shortlisted, they're going to be spending a lot more time going through your CV in detail. But when you've got, you're on a big boat, you've got 5 people to recruit at the beginning of the season, So you've got a pile of CVs across different departments in front of you that they are going to get a very cursory look over.
Mm-hmm. Is the photograph very important?
It's critically important, I think. It's one of the few industries in the world where you have to have a photograph on your CV.
Aesthetics matter.
Yeah, most industries, you would never have a photograph because it's deemed to be discriminatory. You can see that someone's black or Chinese, or maybe you think they look gay, whatever. So you're instantly forming a biased opinion about them purely about the way they look, regardless of whether they're the best financial manager on the planet. And this is why most CVs don't have photographs of them. But yachting's one of those industries where it's clearly very important. Because we want to see that you're well presented. That being
even
the
on your
industry
photo,
for the.
Are you looking more at keep it from your shoulders and a headshot, or waist up?
Head and shoulders. There's a shocking trend at the moment. I think. I think it's only really started happening fairly recently. For photographs of females to come down to their chest, and some of them are, shall we say, capitalizing on that. Just keep it really head and shoulders.
Okay. And hair, as a girl, you want to have your hair back, you want to have makeup or not makeup, you want to look natural. What are the things that strike you?
I think you want to look natural. You certainly don't want to start looking high maintenance. So minimal amounts of makeup, as natural as looking as you possibly can, I would say.
No pouting.
No, not at all. There's another very, very dangerous trend that's been happening over the last couple of years. Not quite so much on people's CV photographs, but the minute you start researching them on the internet,
of course.
It tells a very different story for what you're from the story they're trying to tell you on their CV.
Mm-hmm.
So out of interest, I know in modern day, and we've had this discussion on the station too, of how important it is to make sure that your social media is clean, because people will tend to go and check you out on social media. Are there certain ones that are used more in yachting? Like, I certainly, as a professional, I use LinkedIn a lot, as would you, but Facebook among young people. Instagram, actually, it seems to be the most popular for the under 30s. Are there, I'm presuming, make sure while you're putting together your CV, you also go back through your social media and make sure it is presenting the image you want as well. Do you ever include your links of, if you have a LinkedIn profile and stuff, would you include that on your CV?
I would suggest to anyone that works in yachting that they do a very, very thorough sanitization of their own social media platforms, because it's so easy to, as soon as you see a CV of someone that, looks that they show potential, you just go check them out on the wider internet, and sometimes you see a very different story.
Out of interest, if you got a CV and you're interested in the person, you went online and you found that they didn't have any social media footprint, would that concern you?
No, not at all.
I would just think it quite unique, actually.
It would be very unique. It certainly wouldn't concern me. I personally think that, look, the internet is an amazing thing. I think social media, however, has probably caused more trouble than it's done good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That would be my take on it. The internet is an amazing tool, and
I'd agree with you.
Tremendous stuff, tremendous resources and opportunities out there. It's easy, if we look at what social media is, well, it's just another way of keeping in touch with people. Well, we can write an email to someone that we care about. I don't see why everything has to be out there for the whole world to see. Yes, there are some interesting things that are on social media. When I say that, I'm talking strictly things, like Facebook, like Instagram, and not a lot of the other. I don't consider LinkedIn to be social media to me. I mean, that LinkedIn's such a professional platform, so I don't tar that with the same brush.
You don't get pictures of people's lunch and...
No, it is very much more.
Very, very occasionally you do, and they usually get reprimanded for it almost immediately when it does happen. That people are like, look, this is not Facebook. So no, LinkedIn is extremely professional. And again, as we mentioned, LinkedIn, for anyone that's involved in Yacht Crew and they are not yet on LinkedIn, I would very, very strongly advise you to get yourself a good looking LinkedIn account set up, and engage with it. Use it to your best advantage. It's a very, very powerful medium that's taken very seriously. And yachting as a whole has really missed a trick so far in its very slow adoption of LinkedIn, I think.
Well, the captains wouldn't be using it as much as one would think.
Well, no, I would be linked up.
Not as much as they should be.
I was going to say I would see a lot of captains, but I wouldn't often see. I would be connected through Superyacht Radio to captains, but I wouldn't often see posts from captains. They don't tend to join in the conversations very often. It tends to be more yachting companies who are posting and having conversations.
Yeah. Look, I can understand why, if a captain is in need of crew and they choose to use social media platforms to find that crew, either as an addition to going through agencies or completely to circumvent agencies, whatever their motivation is, I can understand why they do it, because love it or loathe it, Facebook is massive and it's here to stay. And the very fact of the sheer numbers of people within the yachting industry who use Facebook as their only platform probably to interact with the industry, then obviously it's the go-to place because the sheer numbers stack up so much better. However, if I were going to do that as a captain, what I would probably do, I would put a post up saying that, I have 2 positions available and they're available on LinkedIn. And if you want to come to the party, get yourself on LinkedIn. Because it's just so much more professional.
Yeah.
You could put out an announcement on the Facebook pages that this is what's happening. And if you haven't already been smart enough to be signed up to LinkedIn, then maybe it's time to reconsider that.
Indeed. Funny enough, as you say it, I would notice more professionals in the cruise industry to be on LinkedIn than I see super yacht crew. Be it stew, chef,
as in the cruiser ships, the cruiser
yes,
line.
I would see a lot more marine professionals from the cruise industry on LinkedIn than I see of the super yacht industry on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I really don't know why yachting hasn't. I really don't understand why yachting hasn't embraced LinkedIn as well as it should have done. But it will probably happen to some degree in due course. But the uptake's been a lot slower than it should be.
Before we move off sort of CVs, is there we're in a world now that people read less. You need to be more concise. Is there an ideal length for your CV? Do you kind of want it all on one page and just keep it short, brief, and to the point? Or
if you're a youngster, as most people are coming into the industry, unless you have lived an absolutely exceptional life, there's no reason why it shouldn't be on one page, because you simply do not have that amount of experience. Most of the real estate on someone's CV is taken up by 2 decades of employment history. You don't have that when you're 20 years old. So if you can get everything you need to on a single page, then you should. And it should be very easy to do that unless you've got, a rather unusual track record of employment for someone who's as young as that. And if you've had a bunch of jobs that only lasted a few weeks at a time, well, compress it. Just put, I also did this, and this. Keep the, the most pertinent points to the ones where you expand the text a bit.
And how about a mission statement? Something that says who you are.
I'm very wary of. I'm very aware of the term mission statement.
I know. I'm using that as the
world
term.
Peace, for example.
Yeah.
No, I know,
I mean,
and it's a very difficult one to write, to be honest.
It's a bit of
it's very difficult for any of us to be able to sum up who we are in 2 or 3 lines. However, there's very little, if you think of it on a CV, most of it is your professional experience. There's very little that says who you are, unless you have a personal statement in some shape or form.
Yeah, and it is very important. I refer to this as I break it down on the course I'm building at the moment. I break it down into a couple of words. One is an objective. Right, my objective is, now objective's dead easy because you know what you want. My objective is to take on a role as bosun on a motor yacht over 50 meters. Okay, that's pretty simple. So I encourage people to roll these 2 things into one. So you start with the objective. This is my objective, because that's purely a broadcast statement about what you want. And therefore should be fairly simple to put together. And then the personal statement, I think, yes, it is important. The biggest failure that I see with people in their personal statements is they riddle them with buzzwords. And as a recruiter, it's just like reading, it's like reading the school test that everybody copied, because it's the same thing. It's the same buzzwords again and again and again and again. And I think people need to look very closely at how they write this opening salvo, because this really is, this is, okay, the stuff at the top's just your name and where you come from, how to get hold of you. The next part of your photographs up there in the top. The next part, which I've called part 3 in this course that I'm writing, is absolutely one of the most important parts, because this is your opening salvo of who am I, what am I going to bring to the party, and why should you employ me? Right? Mm-hmm. The rest of it is, shall we say, or the rest of it, the next section, which is your employment history, that is more de facto, because that is history. It's exactly what it says. It's what you have done. Okay? But the opening salvo really is phenomenally important, because these are the points you're trying to put across to someone. Here's who I am, and this is why you should employ me. Yeah. The rest of the CV is just a catalogue of history. Okay, some of that history is very important. Oh, he worked for 5 years on a very challenging boat. Well done. Got promoted twice within that 5 years. Yes, it's all very important, but it's as I say, it's more de facto. Whereas your statement that you're making is your opportunity to try and shine and sell yourself subtly, very subtly. It shouldn't be a hard sell. It should be a very subtle sell, and you should be extremely careful about the language that you use in this statement, because you can say an awful lot by saying a lot less if you're careful about it.
If only was you talking about buzzwords. I think it was on LinkedIn. It was somebody going, please, will people stop using the word of, when they come in for a new job, going, I am wanting a new challenge. Because that, for him, challenge was the word that he kept hearing.
For most people, it's just a total lie. For most people, it is a total lie. Okay, you're 19, you're 20 years old. You're probably not looking for a challenge. You're looking for money. You might be looking for a bit of excitement. But I would say the vast majority of young people coming into the industry, they've got plenty to challenge them as it is. They do not need any more challenges.
It's not like you put that on your dating profile, looking for a new girlfriend.
I want
a new challenge.
They probably need they probably want rather something more of a relatively easy life when they're coming in to such an exceptionally unique career. It is going to bring its own challenges with it anyway. So I think for me, look, don't get me wrong, there are people out there that have got phenomenal work ethics, and they will look at it a bit differently. And maybe the reason they're leaving one job is because, they're fed up with the boredom of another, and they just want to be kept more busy, which, people would term as a challenge sometimes these days. So you need to be very, very careful with the buzzwords.
There are certain boats like Kingdom where you can understand that. Certain boats that actually don't leave the dock.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, I can understand he wants a challenge or at least something other than sitting on the pier. But yeah, I think I agree with that.
The other thing I saw coming up on, the yacht crew sites kind of discussion was somebody putting up of who would you recommend as your, I'm new, who would you recommend for getting my CV out? Do I go to crew recruiters, and who would you recommend as crew recruiters? And, I didn't read all the responses because there was a lot of advice. And it was sort of a mixture. It was a mixture of your best to do your own networking, which kind of comes back, I think, a bit to LinkedIn as well, versus, certain recommendations of various people that, various crew recruiters. Where would you stand on the, go it yourself versus getting involved in one of the, because there's lots of crew recruiters at the moment and they have different strengths.
There's, I've followed this quite closely. There are some very reputable crew recruiters who stand by the philosophy that you should do your CV yourself. Now, nobody knows yourself better than you do, and that's fine. But if you're 19, 20 years old, are you really the best person to do this? Because you really don't have a lot of experience.
Yeah, you need some
your
guidance.
CV is so incredibly important. It's like you cannot emphasize how important it is. And to take a risk of just doing it yourself when you don't really know what you're doing, you're only 19, 20, 21 years old, you've got very little experience in life in general, no experience of preparing CVs properly. You don't know what people are looking for. So I think to go it on your own, unless you're exceptionally talented and full of, crystal ball insight, I don't think it's very clever. I think you should definitely be taking advice from somebody who is considerably more experienced in this industry than you are to help you prepare a good CV.
Would I be right in thinking, Ian, that if as a captain you call me to the bridge for my interview, at that stage I've pretty much got the job, it's just down to me now to lose it?
Let's put that a different way.
I mean that in terms
let's
of
look at what is the purpose of the CV.
Yeah.
The purpose of the CV, in my opinion, it serves only one purpose, and that's to get you over the first hurdle to get you shortlisted for an interview. Okay, and that's why I believe you don't try to sell yourself too hard on the CV. You have to be subtle about it. The CV is to get you to an interview. Okay, so then we've got 3 candidates that we're going to interview. Then, as you say, you're going to have a lot more opportunity to tell us about who you are and what you're going to bring to the party. We obviously have an opportunity to assess who you are and decide whether we want to bring you to the party. But the function of the CV is to get you to that interview. If the CV is not good, you will never get to the interview. So you don't get, you don't get over the first hurdle if your CV is not good, and that is why it is so critically important to get it right.
And as for the candidate, when they get to that interview, how important is it that they're asking you questions?
I think it's very important. It's one of the biggest faults of people, I think, when they come to interviews, they just kind of sit there and nod their head and go, yeah. I mean, a lot of that's just down to inexperience. Some of them, the doe that's walked out onto the road and they're just startled in the headlights. And a lot of it might be information overload as well. Young people nervous coming into something they don't know a great deal about. But I think asking questions is very, very important. It always certainly scores points on my checklist when someone is asking some meaningful questions.
Well, one of the first things that one of the first bits of advice I was given on interview technique was when I go in for the interview and I sit down, the first question I should ask is, what was it on my CV that made you bring me in for an interview?
Yeah, this is a question that I always encourage people to ask. Is, if you can't think of anything else, that's probably the one question you should ask. Why did I stand out? What was it that you liked about me?
Well, it does. It kind of brings back to the captain's head why it was that they actually brought you in.
And I mean, certainly, you definitely use it as an ice-breaking question, because it's an easy one, it's a pertinent one. You might be quite interested to hear what the answer is as well. So definitely, if you can think of no other question, then that would be one I'd kick off with for sure.
So moving on for you got your CV in order. I mean, for a lot of people right now, there's still going to be a good couple of weeks, possibly months, who knows how much longer. Are there certain skill sets that you would recommend they make sure that they kind of tune in this time? I realize that that's obviously going to be dependent on what's available to do online. And,
I mean, look, we live in an age where the access to knowledge is it's unprecedented. The resources that we have at our fingertips now, I mean, even just pick one resource. I mean, YouTube. I remember when YouTube started, I don't know, back in, I first started realizing its kind of presence about 2002, 2003, I think, there or thereabouts. And I remember when it was sold, it was a couple of guys that set it up literally in a garage, and it was sold for what was at the time an astronomical amount of money, a fraction of what it's worth now. And I'm sitting there thinking, what on earth is this all about? How did they sell this for what was a huge amount of money at the time? And I just didn't get it. Because back then people were just posting stupid little video things. And I didn't see it. I didn't really see what it was going to turn into. But maybe about 2006, which I think was about when it sold, it started to change. And nowadays, it is an absolutely phenomenal free learning resource. Yeah. Look, there's lots of trash out there, but there is some absolutely fantastic content on YouTube if you look for it. There are people who
courses on it.
There are people who, they create playlists, and, let's say, for example, you want to learn how to use a piece of software. Excel is a good one, which I'm going to talk about specifically. You can go on there and, there'll be a guy or a girl who's created 50 playlists with, anywhere between 10 and 150 separate videos about different aspects of Excel. And you can just go in there, if you've got the required software, you can just download all these playlists. So this is a great thing to do while you're at home and you've got hopefully a fast internet connection. There's bits of software where you can literally download entire playlists in a wunner, so then you can keep them locally on a hard drive. So when you're on a boat, you've got a bit of free time, whatever, you can sit, you can get your skills up to speed on whatever subject it is you want to. But there is a tremendous amount of information out there, and some of it is extremely good. So, YouTube is in itself just, if you don't use any other resource, you can learn so many things on YouTube. I'll go back to Excel for a minute, because I think this is quite a good one. Particularly people who work in interior or deck, actually. If you're a first officer or you're a chief stew purser, you could be expected to be using Excel quite extensively. It's an incredibly powerful program, possibly the single most powerful piece of software on the planet, actually, that's out there open to everybody. And if you don't know your way around it, I would take some time to start learning how to use Excel, because it's very powerful, and it is so well spread across so many different industries and sectors. I mean, it's everywhere, and it's used on boats extensively, and a lot of people's skills in it are very, very limited. So I think it's an excellent piece of software to spend a little bit of time learning, especially if you're, not necessarily a junior crew member, but you're a little bit higher up the ladder and you've got some time on your hands. If you're a stewardess or, a first officer, I would take a look at getting your skills honed a little bit on using Excel, because it's a very, very good skill to have.
Well, I actually never thought of that, to be honest. We've heard about online courses and watching videos and stuff, but I never thought about skilling up those sort of IT skills.
Well,
it's so easy to do. I mean, it's such a widely used bit of software. But, if you just think the things that you can use Excel for on a boat are amazing, especially if it doesn't have a proper, a really high quality, full on vessel management system. Your accounts will always be done on Excel. Your inventory will be done on Excel. Your, whatever management system you've had to create because your owner won't, spend thousands of euros to buy one. It's all done on Excel. Your planned maintenance, it's all done on Excel. So it's an extremely useful piece of software to get your head around. I'll just, for anyone that's interested, I mean, if they don't know the way around Excel, I can give you an example of just a few basic things that you should start looking at in Excel. So if you look at how to do drop downs, which is part of the data validation, if you learn how to use the sum if function, the VLOOKUP function, the HLOOKUP function, and if you learn how to do relative and absolute formula referencing and conditional formatting, that's you learned. If you get your head around those various functions I've just named, there's not much you won't be able to do with Excel on board a boat. As I say, it really comes into its own if you don't have a full-on, top quality vessel management system on board, because you're then going to have to do all of this via various, different messy routes, but you can use Excel to do them all if you have to kind of figure them all out on your own.
The other side to Excel is if people are looking at it, they've got time, have a look at the macro side and being able to program in VBA, which is a relatively simplistic programming languages. And
if you want to really push the boat out, get into pivot tables, but that's another story.
Yeah, the amount of power behind the Excel and the Microsoft suite using VBA.
Excel is incredibly powerful software. It really is. And it's so versatile. You can do almost anything with it.
And also
incredibly
powerful. You can combine it with Word document, with all of the Microsoft Office suite.
Yep.
And create incredible applications very simply.
There's the other fact as well, is that you possibly won't always be on a boat. So having extra skill sets, that you can take long term with you, is probably going to be a really handy skill. I mean, it's a really simple thing of touch typing. I wish I had pursued it a little bit more when I was a teenager, because sure, I can type, but wish I had really properly learned touch typing, because it slows me down not being
these are
as
great
quick as I could.
transferable skills. It doesn't matter where you go next. Let's say you've become a chief steward in a Purser, you go ashore doing something, having a good knowledge of Excel is going to stand you in really good stead. Another software application which I think is somewhat underused, and another good one for people to get their head around, is Adobe Acrobat Pro. Now, the Pro version of it is the one that allows you to actually do the full authoring within it. It's not cheap, but if you've got access to it, there's countless uses on board for generating live forms. So, for example, again, it comes into its own if you're on a boat that is too tight to pay for a proper VMS. You can, let's say, for example, all your daily, weekly, monthly checklists that you have to do, you can create your own forms from scratch on Acrobat Pro. And then once you've completed them, you can just put them on an iPad. So, the bosun can just walk around the boat with an iPad and do all of this stuff in form fields that have become completely, electronic live. So you can just go around and put all this data in, and, you can upload it to a little onboard cloud, whatever. You can come up with some very, very good solutions very easily if you just, take the time to get your head around some of these bits of software. So that's that's another one that's really well worth looking into.
I've never thought of that. I never really looked at that as a data gathering thing.
Oh, it's brilliant. You can, you just make up your own custom-made live forms from scratch, and then, as I say, that's a good example. All your weekly, monthly, checks, etc. You just walk around and boom, 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 do it all on the iPad, and you can save it to a cloud server on the boat and off the boat as well.
And is that information saved as a PDF, or is it saved in what format?
Well, it is, because that's the PDF is the native file extension of Acrobat, but it's an editable PDF, so all your form fields are live. So every field, simply you just click on it and then you can type whatever text you need to, or you can use drop downs, etc. to go through all these things.
So in essence, make sure don't forget, even though you're skilling up on other skills, and we look at the medical skills, or as Stu's, all the different extra amazing skills they have with ranging, whatever.
But just think
don't forget about your don't forget your techie skills, because long term
here's another one. I've always found this a very annoying situation on boats. AV systems. The guests break them all the time because they simply press the wrong buttons, and then worse still, what they then do, if it doesn't work through the iPad or the Crestron system or whatever, they go and start pressing the actual physical buttons on the equipment. And in most cases, no one except the engineer, maybe the captain, knows how to put it all back to square one. So a very good thing, and anyone who's a stewardess should know how to use the front end of the AV systems on board a boat, so that when the owners do mess it up, you can very simply take it back off and go, there you go, sir, thank you, boom, 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 boom. The number of times I've had the owners, getting really frustrated because they want to watch the football, but the owners themselves have gone and physically started pressing the knobs and turning the buttons on the AV receiver, and the stewardesses don't know how to get it all back to where they need to. Yes, a really simple thing to do. So just spend a bit of time learning about the AV the generic setup of the front end of an AV system, and then when you're back on your own boat, if you're not on it already, get into it, learn how to use it, so that every time the owners or guests have deviated from where they want to be, you're the superstar that just comes back and says, boom, 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 there you go.
Is Kaleidoscape not very unique to most installations?
Well, it's a big name on yachting. I don't have a very high opinion of it. It costs an insane amount of money, and I don't see where the value is in it.
Yeah, and also
yes, it is. It's a big player.
You're tied to individual developers as well.
It's an unnecessarily expensive system, in my opinion. Very, very unnecessarily expensive.
So, Ian, before we hit the top of the news, top of the hour, which is going to be the news, what's your perspective in the last minute of how we're going, or how the industry is going to recover? Are you positive? Are you optimistic? Are you feeling there's going to be inevitable some big changes? You've been a captain for quite some time now, and you've certainly gone through the last economic recession, although this is very different on many levels. What's your perspective before we leave you?
I think the industry will recover because it's driven by the wealthiest people in the world, and they will want to, maintain their ability to use their assets. Yes, there's been substantial economic chaos, and we're a long way from out of the woods with that yet, and that may well affect some of the portions of owners, depending on how and where their money was invested, and they may find themselves that there's always people in yachting that can't afford to be in it. So some owners may end up out of yachting by the time the dust has settled and all of this. But I think it may take time to recover, but if you look at how the industry was, a few months ago before this started, very, very buoyant. You look on, LinkedIn, the yachting press, there's big new launches coming out on a very, very frequent basis. I think once the dust settles, everything will be generally okay, because the people that drive the whole industry, they want their toys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we recovered the last time, and
I think there will be some casualties, because there are people always in yachting that really can't afford to be in it at the level that they are currently in it, shall we say. So I'm sure there will be some casualties, but where there's casualties, there's opportunity for the other guys who are richer. Maybe they want another boat.
Okay. Well, Captain Ian Flockhart, thank you as always on joining us on Superyacht Radio. It has always been a pleasure to get your advice and your good tips.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, we've got to do it sooner than later, Ian. Good to talk with you.
Okay.
Stay safe.
You are listening to Superyacht Radio.